let's talk about those specific communication partner strategies that I've been promising. These ideas aren't new, and you likely use all or most of these strategies already. But what we hope happens here is that you have these as tools, maybe a group of ideas that when you see a student struggling to communicate, you can start thinking about your own interaction style and your own skills and things that you can do to support that student. If they could communicate, they would. So what can we do as a communication partner to make their opportunity more successful? So this section is about our skills and our styles and not the students. So to get started, if we just think about our communication style, we can think about it in the way we communicate with adults. Think about somebody you really enjoy talking to. What do they do to keep you engaged? What is it about their interaction style that promotes engagement? We can use a lot of those same ideas with students. The Hannon Early Language Parent Program is out of Canada, out of Toronto, and they've been teaching parents for a long time about how to support communicative engagement. If you haven't heard of them, they have several programs, and you can just Google Hannon Center, Hanen. But they look at seven different interaction styles, and we all do some of them some of the time. Maybe we use some of them more than others. And so let's just think about our own interaction style for a minute. When are we the director? That's when we maintain control and we make lots of suggestions. We give a lot of directions. But our adult behavior is telling the child that the expectation is for them to respond to us. So even though we use the style of the director a lot, it really sets the stage for the child to be a responder. Another style that we use a lot, and actually I'm guilty of this one, I like to be the entertainer. And as I've been talking about, we like to have fun. But if we just be the entertainer without really giving the child the opportunity to be involved, then they're just being entertained. Another style that the Hannon Center talks a lot about is the timekeeper. And as parents, we've probably done this one a lot, where we just rush through activities to get done. It's not about the process, it's about the product or the event and getting done and staying on schedule. But we risk losing what happens in the moment when we are spending too much time as the timekeeper. The next interaction style that Hannon talks about is the adult that's just too quiet. And again, as a parent, I know I am guilty of this a lot. When everyone's quiet and working on their own, that's okay. But if we do that all the time, again, we're missing opportunities for kids to tell us what they know. The next one is the cheerleader. And again, I think we all do some of this where we're really just giving a lot of praise and we're getting very excited when a child accomplishes a task. But the risk we run here is that external reinforcement becomes the focus. And we really want the engagement to be the focus. So we can't always be in the role of the cheerleader. And finally, the helper. And again, because we are all in this field, we're probably innately nurturers, and we really want to help students. But what we can again run the risk of is that presuming the child needs help even when they don't. And our intentions are good, but if we are talking for the child or anticipating their every need without giving them the opportunity to tell us what they're thinking, then again we miss those opportunities. So we're really well intended, and when we use these other interaction styles, but the style that supports a child's ability to be engaged and to communicate is really what Hannon calls, and a lot of the literature actually calls a responsive communication partner. So a responsive communication partner is where we're really tuned in to the child. We're tuned into their abilities, their needs, their interests. We expect them to take a turn, and we encourage engagement with that high expectation. So as we talked about before, we really craft our turn in a way that promotes their turn. So we listen, we watch, we follow their lead. A responsive communication partner is probably one of the most difficult of these interaction styles, and some people are more innate in this style, and some of us really have to work at it. So strategies that help us be a responsive communication partner are things like, as I mentioned before, just following the child's lead. When we do that and we just go with what they're interested in or they're doing, we really are more likely to find out what motivates them, obviously to establish joint attention. And that's really true at all language levels if you think about it. Even when we talk to adults, if we follow their lead and we share control, it's easier to stay engaged. The next strategy that I think is really difficult for all of us is wait. Wait time is hard. If we wait too long, we might lose the child and the interaction's over. But if we don't wait long enough, we might have missed an opportunity for a kid to say something or take that turn. So it really is important to have that relationship where you know how long to wait. Proximity is easy. That's just letting the student know you're in there with them. I almost always get down on eye level when I'm talking to little people, but you have to think about proximity for older students as well. And again, students with autism really need that information on how close to be and what are we doing to let the other person know that we're in this interaction with them. Imitation is also an easy in. If somebody repeats what you do or say, it lets you know that they heard you, and again, that we're in this interaction together. Repetition, so it's not like imitation, it's actually repeating ideas and information. So we might turn the water on and we put our shoes on, and we turn the lights on and we put the peanut butter on the bread. So we can repeat ideas to give kids more familiarity and be more comfortable with the language. But we can also repeat conversations, and we're going to talk later about routines. But repetition of ideas and information is really comfortable for kids. If you think about it, there's lots of literature out there, and I don't have an exact citation, so if somebody comes up with that, I will be so happy. But I've read it in past where kids will read their favorite story 200 times or watch their favorite show over and over and over, and we've seen that with our kids because they need to become comfortable with the information and then build. They can't take everything in at once, so then new information can build on information that's already meaningful for them. The next one I want to talk about is questions. As adults, I think we overuse questions with kids, and that's fair. I mean, it's not fair. It's understandable because if we ask a question, we're almost certain that that student will take a turn. So if we're thinking about crafting our turn so that the student takes a turn, a question is it's an easy strategy. But the thing we want to do is not overuse questions. We want to use questions to the same degree that we use other functions of communication. If we think about adults we like to talk to, do we like to talk to someone who just bombards us with questions? And what is a fair question? I think if we're going to use a question, we really have to formulate the question in a way that the student can realistically answer it. Because we always want to keep our students successful. And if we ask them a question that is just too difficult, we've really sabotaged the interaction. And we only want to ask a question when we expect an answer. And finally, the other easy strategy is one we've kind of talked about before, and that's using humor or animation or whatever positive emotion or idea that we can bring to the interaction to help build that intrinsic love of engagement. So as we were talking about earlier, we don't want to be the entertainer, but we all like to be engaged in a positive interaction where there is some humor or even just animation, like intonation and excitement in your voice. And the first idea in modeling is our ability to model nonverbal behavior. You know, we actually use much more nonverbal communication than verbal. And if you're nonverbal and your verbal messages don't match, your nonverbal message will override your verbal message every time. So nonverbal communication is very powerful, and we want to help our kids understand that. So here, take a look at what I mean.
No one told you life was gonna be this way. Your job's a joke, you broke.
I'm pregnant. And you're the father, by the way, but you got it.
Your job's a joke, you broke. Your love life's the way.
No, I could get him to forgive us.
I don't know.
I'm telling you. I can do it.
Yeah, he can do it.
It's like you're always stuck in second gear.
He was like this crazy-eyed, hairy beast man. He was like a Bigfoot or a Yeti or something. Hi, just so you know, we didn't mean to fog you. We actually thought you were like a Yeti or something. Hi.
So you like the short hair better?
What? Yeti? Danny?
When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year, but
Phoebes? Hello?
I'll be there for you. When the rain starts to fall, I'll be there for you. I'll be there for you.
If you two are happy, then I'm happy for you. I'm fine.
Really?
Absolutely. I'm fine. Totally fine. I don't know why it's coming out all loud and squeaky, because really, I'm fine.
I'll be there for you. 'Cause you're there for me too.
Joe?
Well, I guess Joey went home. Oh, and look, there is still one box that I have to unpack. Oh, my God. You almost gave me a heart attack. Oh.
Still in bed at 10 and work again at 8.
My best friend and my sister. I cannot believe this.
Sorry, but it's true. I love him too.
My best friend and my sister. I cannot believe this.
Burned your breakfast so far, things are going great. Your mother warned you there'd be days like these. But you
Let's put aside the fact that you accidentally picked up my grandmother's ring and you accidentally proposed to Rachel.
When people do this, I don't really know what that means.
I'm sorry.
And when it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, even your year, I'll be there for you. When the rain starts to fall, I'll be there for you.
So we can think about modeling all of those nonverbal behaviors, including things like intonation and prosody, especially again with students. For students with autism, sometimes they'll have very robotic speech, and we can model things like a questioning voice or how to put emphasis on different words to give a sentence new meaning. So we can model nonverbal behavior. We can also model joint attention behaviors, such as pointing. We talked about in the second module. Pointing is a great joint attention behavior, or showing, reaching, and that eye contact or shared eye gaze. We can model that and help our students know the impact that these nonverbal behaviors and joint attention behaviors have. Another way we can think about modeling is to say it as he would if he could. This is one of my favorite suggestions for parents and teachers. It really gives us the opportunity to think about what they would say if they could, and it helps us craft our turn. So we can provide that model at the right language level. So if they're an emerging communicator and something is happening that's funny, we might just use one word and say silly. At a conversational level where somebody thinks something is silly but they really don't have a way to put that into a sentence, we might say something like, I really think that's silly. And then they might be empowered to say, yeah, that's what I was thinking. That is silly what's happening. So to say it as he would if he could, is a great strategy. And I think, in my opinion, it's probably one of the most effective strategies that we can use as a communication partner, especially when we're thinking about crafting our turn so that the student can take a turn. And if we say it as he would if he could, we don't risk the chance of saying using too many words or taking it to a level that doesn't provide him the opportunity to take a turn. I guess I like to think of it as using up the turn. So if I just said to an emerging communicator, silly, then they can say, yes, silly, or silly bird. But if I say, wow, that bird over there is so silly, I've used up all the turns, and I've said everything that could be said about that experience. So again, say it as he would if he could. Effective communication partner strategy. Another important strategy that builds on keeping students successful is the idea of match plus one. And we've seen this in lots of ways, especially SLPs talk about language expansion and different things. But I like this strategy. I think this comes from Hannon as well, or at least some version of it. If we match what a student says, so as we were talking earlier, we maybe imitate what they're doing. We match their level, their word, their idea. Maybe we imitate them, but we add just one little bit more piece of information or idea. So if a child says more, you might say more juice. Or they say, I want more juice, you might say, you do want more juice. You like apple juice. So it really keeps the student successful. It allows for that opportunity for you and the student to have that reciprocity, and you're not taking all the turns, and you're adding just enough information to keep the student engaged. So match plus one is another great strategy that we can think about, we can keep in our mind as we're crafting our turn so that our students can take another turn. And finally, another modeling strategy that we can use comes from Emily Rubin, and that's really using power words. We can use words that are people and actions, and those are the kinds of words that are going to keep our students engaged. We can make the most impact when we use people's names and action words. We can also use emotion words. We have to be careful though with emotion words, because remember, if we don't have great language skills and emotional stress is high, we can really be asking too much of our students. So it might be a good idea to practice using highly charged words when they aren't necessarily in the moment having that emotion. So remember that made you sad. Let's talk about sad when you're not feeling sad, and then maybe we'll talk about it when you're just a little bit sad. And we really need to think about how we can balance that stress, but still model emotion words. Okay, the next really important idea that I want to talk about is prompting. So Pat Rydell talks about prompting being maybe rarely necessary, and that's one opinion. I think there's times when prompting may be needed, and you and your team will really want to talk about this idea of prompting, because we know that if we over prompt or we constantly prompt, that a child will become prompt dependent. They'll wait for us to cue them. They'll wait for us to let them know when they're supposed to do or say something. And that is the complete opposite of idea that we're trying to get to, where kids communicate independently. So when we prompt, we really need to be cognizant of the level of prompting we're using, and we have to always be thinking about, can we fade that prompt? When we've decided to use a prompt, we always want to make sure we can fade it. A safe way to think about prompting is to really use the natural cues that happen. Things like an expectant look and maybe getting closer to the child to let them know that you're really there waiting for them to take their turn. Things like long pauses or raising your intonation. All of these things are much less intrusive, and they may just be enough of a cue. Gestures are also, I think, a little bit more natural. We along with the nonverbal communication, we use a lot of gestures. And when we think of joint attention behaviors like pointing and showing, those are very natural gestures that we can model for kids. But they can also serve as a prompt, and we need to be really aware of when we're giving those kinds of prompts. Because when we're not around giving those prompts and kids need to be independent, we can't have them be dependent on those prompts. Verbal prompts are the most used probably, and I think the type of prompt that we need to be most aware of. We model, when we were talking about modeling, we talked a lot about modeling verbal turns, and that in itself can be a prompt. And I think it's a much more natural way to suggest that a child take a turn. So when you say something paired with an expectant look, then you're really helping that child know that you're expecting them to take a turn, and that really is a prompt. If a child is enjoying the cookies and you say, "I like cookies," and look at them expectantly, you really are trying to elicit a comment from them. The thing we don't want to do, though, is to tell the child what to say. If they're looking like they enjoyed the cookies and we say to the student, say, "I like cookies," then they really are, we've taken all their power, we've taken all the control. And you know, it's likely that they liked the cookies, but what if they're just really hungry and they don't like the cookies, and now we've just labeled something incorrectly for them? So I think we have to be so careful not to use a lot of verbal prompts and really think of it differently when we're modeling verbal behavior, to do it in a way that we're not telling the student what we think they should be saying. Also, when we think about fading prompts, think about how difficult it is to fade a verbal prompt. You can't really just say part of the prompt. If you have a gestural prompt, a physical prompt, any of the other prompts we've talked about, they're much easier to fade out. But a verbal prompt is kind of either there or not. So it doesn't have that level of support that the other more natural prompts have. So that's really a lot to think about. In your note catcher in the resource folder, you'll see all these ideas listed. And what I want you to do now is, for our quick little knowledge check, is to watch the videos. There's a video of Kim and some young adults, and then there's one with me and an emerging communicator. His little name is Chase. And watch these videos. They're short, and on that note catcher, or even on the notes you've taken, look for the communication partner strategies that you see us using, and then go into the quiz and just check them off. I'm sure you'll be able to at least find 5. So this knowledge check isn't going to have a grade. You don't have to have a certain number, but I'm pretty confident that you can find at least 5 of those communication partner strategies for each of our videos. All right, enjoy.